You were never going to give Kenobi a chance, were you? Let's be honest. Face the facts. Most Star Wars fans didn't go into the show with the right attitude. Most of you went in expecting to hate it. And when you go into a show expecting to hate it, don't be surprised when you hate it. I've been saying pretty much all along, both in my reviews and on Twitter, that the show is being unfairly maligned. Now, it's not a masterpiece, to be sure. We're going to get into that a little bit in this Torches Soapbox rant. Now, I'm calling this video in defense of Disney's Obi-Wan Kenobi series because it does seem like there was at least an attempt to try to do right by these characters, to try to do justice to the connection of the prequel trilogy to the original trilogy. Now, a lot of people don't see it that way, and a lot of people have gone off onto many tangents over many different aspects of this. In the first case, people are saying it's woke. It's woke garbage. It's terrible because of Riva and Tala, these female characters that are taking up a lot of screen time. And it's true. That's probably the extent of the wokeness of the show. There's a desire on Lucasfilm's part, thanks to apparently Kathleen Kennedy with the Force's female narrative, to try to feministize the Star Wars brand. And so, as I'd said even before the show came out, if this was a show done under Lucas, we would have had a really cool action figure looking Inquisitor. Instead, they just cast a black woman as Riva. And in the case of like Tala, we had to make sure that, yes, there's one strong person of color female on the rebellion that's sort of shepherding the way. A lot of those moments are in the show, and I'm not trying to deny them nor downplay them. But you have to remember that we've come quite a ways in having Rey be a Mary Sue during the sequel trilogy, Kira in Solo basically defeating the villain of that film instead of the titular hero. We're coming a ways from that with the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. At no time does Riva actually seem anything less than inept. She's sort of a try-hard. She's trying to get things done for her own benefit. But she fails basically every single step of the way. This is not wokeness. You can't have your character, the antagonist, I suppose, although, of course, they would have to try to bring her back and, make her a hero again. But you can't have the antagonist fail that many times and still consider them a Mary Sue. Now, I think if anything, Riva has unlimited plot armor. She really doesn't have to pay any consequences for anything she does. But to say that she is a Mary Sue or that the show is woke just by definition of her being in it as a main antagonist, no. The same thing with Tala. She's basically a figurehead. She's there to die for the cause, to show that, strong woman giving her all for the cause and ends up dying in the process. Again, that's not a Mary Sue. She doesn't really do anything that is beyond the call of duty. I mean, when you see the noble sacrifice, that doesn't necessarily tie into anything inherently Mary Sue. So again, one of the worst aspects of the series was Riva, mostly because it was a poorly written character, a poorly written part of the story in general. And quite honestly, Moses Ingram was not the best choice for this role. I think she did better near the end during her redemption, but she was not really the one to play a heavy in such an important series as this. Now, going forward, like I said, it's become fashionable to bash Disney Star Wars. But you know what? Guess what? It's always been fashionable to bash Star Wars. You go back, and of course, me being an OG fan, during sort of that dark period in the early 90s, a lot of people were poo-pooing Return of the Jedi, the Ewoks, this and that. they didn't really have a full appreciation. And this is sort of the lay Star Wars fan. This is not really the diehard, but they didn't appreciate Return of the Jedi. Then, shortly after, we have the prequel trilogy. And of course, the steady flow of tears. If anybody remembers The Phantom Menace, you can remember when it came out. You can remember the steady flow of tears of everyone saying how their childhood was ruined. And the Star Wars fan is a melodramatic bunch. And so you have to take every single complaint with a immeasurable grain of salt. It's been this way for a long time, and of course, need I even go further with Attack of the Clones, the worst dialogue ever written to mankind. Now all of a sudden things are coming around. The people that were young at the time when these OG fans were going nuts grew up with these movies the same way the OG fans like myself grew up with the original trilogy, and they appreciate it more now on that level. The problem being is the one thing that united all Star Wars fans was the sequel trilogy, which we pretty much across the board, I would say 95% of Star Wars fans admitted was terrible. And that 5% are really just Twilight fans trying to glom on to the next ship type thing that they're going to want to root for. Oh, Rey and Kylo Ren, and or maybe Finn and Rey, or maybe Finn and Poe. You know, that was the whole basis for fandom for the sequel trilogy fans. I've always said The Last Jedi is the choice film for non-Star Wars fans. And I mean it. A lot of people who confess to me to never have liked Star Wars have told me they like The Last Jedi. And that's indicative of how that film is. The only way to like that is if you have no knowledge of the original trilogy, particularly Luke Skywalker. So when we all united against the sequel trilogy, for the most part, it sort of gave validation to the prequel haters, to the lay Star Wars fan that just says, The Empire Strikes Back was the last good Star Wars movie. Those are not fans. Those are not your Star Wars fans by and large. Those are people who sort of grew up with the concept of Star Wars, but not actually being a fan of Star Wars. Real fans enjoy all three movies, all six movies, all three movies of the prequel trilogy, I was going to say, and of course, all three movies in the original trilogy, including Return of the Jedi. But the majority of fans don't like the sequel trilogy. And it became fashionable to bash Disney because of just how bad and just how purely garbage they are. And I could go on another rant just about how garbage they are, and I probably should because I haven't talked about that often enough. It should be completely stricken from the canon. But instead of digressing, let us get to the point. Everybody united in that, and that gave the prequel trilogy haters, that gave the Empire's the last good Star Wars movie fans, quote unquote fans, ammunition. Because they felt justified when everybody was saying, oh, yeah, look, Star Wars is horrible now. Star Wars can only exist as it's horrible for some people, for some reason. Revenge of the Sith got moderate reaction because they finally, wrapped it up with Vader. But you even had complaints back then. We didn't see enough Vader. You can check out my In Defense of George Lucas in the prequel trilogy video to sort of encapsulate what was going on at that time. But this gave them that impetus where now we're going into Star Wars looking to complain about it. We're not going into it to see how it is. Originally, that's what we did. We went into The Force Awakens and Rogue One to see how it was. We didn't have any preconceived ideas, and to different degrees, people responded well. They responded well to Rogue One because wokeness hadn't really taken hold. As we were talking about Riva, it was the same thing with Rogue One. We had to have an all-new female hero that was going to take us through the adventure in Jyn Erso. But it wasn't woke just to have a main female character. In the same way that Riva doesn't necessarily make the show woke just because she's a POC woman in a prominent role. You have to have them, and in the same way, Jyn Erso dies. You have to have them the same way be untouchable. And people are reacting to Kenobi as if it is as untouchable as Rey was. Riva is as untouchable a character as Rey. Now, the wokeness was turned down to some, you know, mildly embraceable level in Rogue One. The Force Awakens is another story. The Force Awakens I knew was going to be crap. They had the flavor, they had the feeling, but The Force Awakens just completely regressed the story. If you're just going to retell the original story and you're just going to sort of crap on your characters, crap on Han Solo, he's going backwards instead of forwards. Now he's a smuggler again at 75. You've regressed the character. That was the folly of that. But again, people went in with expectations. People went in with expectations for The Last Jedi to be good. Now you've got all your nerdrotics, your geeks and gamers, your fandom menace. A lot of these people actually liked that early stuff. They liked Rogue One. They liked the Phantom Menace. They gave The Last Jedi the benefit of the doubt and said it was pretty good when they first came out. And then what happens? Lo and behold, they moisten a finger, stick it in the air, and ooh, yeah, people don't like this. Yeah, I'm going to say that people don't like this. And The Mandalorian came out, same thing happened. People were on the fence about it, and so it was kind of fashionable to bash it for a few episodes, and then it was like, well, people are responding well to this. This is great. Favreau for president, Filoni for vice president. Let's let them take over Lucasfilm. But the fact is, the fandom menace community are not going to tell you that Disney Star Wars is ever any good if they can help it. Because they know their bread and butter is clickbait, to complain every step of the way, because it's much easier to hate watch a show and try to get like-minded people to come in and say right on than it is to fairly and effectively review it. And that's why I say, you have to be taking these guys' opinions with a grain of salt. And the feedback that I've seen on Twitter is just ridiculous. People are complaining about the most ridiculous, asinine, ludicrous things from all corners of the show. As I said, if you want to complain about Riva, you want to complain that it's woke, that we have, women in charge and they're doing these spectacular things, that would be one thing. But we have people complaining about, how did little Leia know how to plug in the wire to open the bay doors for the space cruiser to get out? I mean, really? This is what I'm faced with every day. Really? This is what you're going to complain about? And I felt tremors of this during Book of Boba Fett. When Book of Boba Fett came out and I realized that it wasn't a great show. I still don't think it was a great show, although due to the Mandalorian coming into it in the last act, it kind of tightened up a little bit, but still not a great show. But when people were complaining about, oh, the dumb Power Rangers bikes, how did they get those nice clean bikes on planet like Tatooine? And, it only took me a millisecond to realize that they're just complaining to find something to complain about, just to have another meme to go around. I mean, again, the show wasn't great, but that's what you complain about? The bikes actually were, if you want to give it a scintilla of thought, was probably a throwback to George Lucas' American Graffiti, because we all know that he likes that aesthetic. He even did Dex's Diner and Attack of the Clones. And I think the idea was they were going to look like throwbacks, like you could have seen them in like 1962 if Tatooine existed in 1962. But again, it's these stupid, ridiculous complaints. When you're complaining about baby Princess Leia opening a door, you don't look good. You look stupid. You look childish. Because if there's anything of any note to complain about, that's not it. Complaining about Obi-Wan Kenobi throwing rocks at Vader. Well, let me clue you in. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but there was a little movie called The Empire Strikes Back where Force telekinesis was used by Lord Vader in the fight with Luke Skywalker. This was established 1980. And I say these things, and people like they have a glazed a glaze over their understanding. They can't comprehend of the concept that they do not even know the original trilogy nor the prequel trilogy as well as they think they do. Because anything that you find to complain about in this show seems like it was meticulously run by somebody that said, this actually fits. In some cases, not only does it fit, but it actually deepens the later films, the original trilogy. In some cases, maybe it reflects back on the prequel trilogy. But then, of course, before we wrap it up, the coup de grace is people complaining about Vader and Obi-Wan can't possibly fight, before A New Hope again. That just won't be possible. We can't accept Leia doing a formal message to Obi-Wan as a princess and senator on behalf of her father. It's got to be she has to do the message saying, "Remember me when I was a kid about 10 years ago?" Or the whole trilogy is completely crumbled under the weight of that retroactive continuity. There are so many things that George Lucas himself, in the original trilogy as well as the prequel trilogy, he retroactively built things back into the story. I mean, I'm not going to go through all of them, but obviously, Princess Leia was not originally intended to be Luke's sister. That was going to be in episode 7, 8, and 9. She was going to be revealed when Lucas felt burned out during Empire Strikes Back. He just modified it. He brought the Emperor further into the story instead of waiting to deal with him at the end. Things happened in the original trilogy. Same thing with the prequel trilogy. Now, all of a sudden, Chewie knows Yoda. Now, he never mentions this to Han Solo, that he was a veteran in the Clone Wars fighting alongside Yoda. R2-D2 never thinks to mention when he's on Dagobah that this crazy little guy that he's playing tug of war with is actually the Jedi Master Luke is looking for. No, these things that were retroactively brought into continuity, people just hand wave, and that's okay. But I can't hand wave that when Leia is doing the message, she is speaking from a respectful, princess and senatorial convention. Same thing with Vader. When they actually show Obi-Wan defeating Vader, clearly keeping the line, "When I left you, I was but the learner, now I'm the master," intact. There is literally nothing to complain about in a lot of these quote unquote canon breakages that somehow are meant to destroy the saga because of this one show. Now, again, this show could have been tightened up a lot more. It needed some work. It was about 75% there. I think wokeness only accounted for maybe 2%. I think a lack of passion was probably another good 15%. But the show was 75 to 80% there. And for people to just throw the baby out with the bathwater and act like, well, this show was terrible from beginning to end, and we're going to look at every single angle of it and find a way to complain about it, it's disingenuous. And it insults my intelligence because, quite honestly, we all know George Lucas is the only one that should be creating Star Wars. That's not going to happen anymore. He's never going to, quite possibly never going to, use any of his material in a Star Wars movie or TV show again. We have to play with we have to play with the cards that we're dealt. And we're dealt Disney. And when Disney is starting to do things at least 75% of the way there, I am not going to just completely rag on it, throw it out as being horrible and worthless when it looks like some effort is being made. How do you ever think they are going to give you what you want if you're going to continually and completely reject whatever they offer, either sight unseen or just because? I mean, for instance, a lot of people, well, just because what happened to Gina Carano, I'm not even going to watch. Well, let's be honest. Gina Carano is going to do all right without you white knighting for her. She's got a good career going, and, she doesn't need Star Wars. You know, Star Wars is not or should not stop just because of the terrible and evil people at Lucasfilm. And they are terrible and evil people. They treat their fans with less than contempt. But if you ever want the right things to come out of Lucasfilm, you do have to react positively when it is merited. You can't just completely trash everything. And like I said, a lot of the people that are just completely trashing everything are, the YouTube fandom menace. These are the same people that kissed up to Zack Snyder. Now, why do I pay attention to anything they have to say after that? Zack Snyder is the worst, and I could go on a rant on him all day. Quite honestly, he ruined Superman and Batman on film, probably for another generation. It doesn't look like we're going to get another Superman movie anytime soon. Batman, of course, is going back to the same wheel of pain that he's on, going around continuously, where he'll only be a grim and gritty character with no sci-fi villains and no imagination. But again, I digress. We'll save that for another rant. But again, you have to give every single Disney Star Wars product its due. You have to judge it fairly. Not too many people have gone into this judging it fairly. They went into it looking to complain. And like I said, if you go into something looking to complain, quite honestly, you're going to complain. You didn't go into Obi-Wan Kenobi looking to give it a fair shake. And that is more than obvious. This is Johnny Torch stepping down from my soapbox and reminding you once again, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.